When people think of Scottish history, they often think of Scotland as a victim of colonisation by the English rather than as an active coloniser in their own right. And when people do think of Scotland and its role in colonialism, it is usually within the context of Scotland's role in the British Empire. It is much less frequent that people consider the earlier colonisation of the Gaelic Scottish Highlanders by the Scots-speaking Lowlanders, and this is what I'm going to be talking about today. By the late 16th century, the Scottish Highlands had a long history of being difficult for the Crown to manage, and with the steady decline of the Gaelic language and the rise of the English dialect Scots in the lowlands, government policy became increasingly hostile to the Gaelic population of the Highlands. Until fairly recently, large parts of the Highlands had enjoyed almost complete independence from the central government, with James IV, Vth and Mary Queen of Scots' reigns all being marred by conflict and rebellion in the Western Highlands, since James IV forcibly dissolved the lordship of the Isles held by the MacDonald family. All this combined with the slower spread of Protestantism, the Highlands created a view of the Highlanders as inherently rebellious, barbaric and insufficiently pious. As a consequence, by the reign of James VI, government policy towards the Highlands aimed to eradicate the Gaelic language and culture, with the Gaelic language being referred to simply as Irish, implying that it was foreign in its nature. Official documents at the time said that Highlanders were prone to all kind of barbarous and bestial cruelties. One of the most notable efforts during James's reign in destroying the Gaelic language started with the attempted colonisation of the Isle of Lewis, when the MacLeod clan who ruled the area received a message from the government stating that they lacked legal documents proving their ownership of the land. Such documentation, which they often did not possess, was now required of the Highland chieftains in the aftermath of a recent Act of Parliament. Furthermore, the lack of clearly established legal documentation cemented the lowland view of the Gaelic Highlanders as lawless and uncivilised. In 1598, James authorised the proposal of a group of noblemen who became known as the Fife adventurers to colonise the Isle of Lewis. And whilst in theory they were dealing with fellow Scots, you wouldn't know from the way the Gaelic population was discussed. In his 1599 book, The Basilicon Doron, James VI said of the Highlanders, "The one that dwelleth in our mainland that are barbarous for the most part, and yet mixed with some show of civility. The other that dwelleth in the Isles, and are all utterly barbarous, without any sort or show of civility." Furthermore, Highlanders were also accused of cannibalism frequently by the Lowlanders. In the eyes of many Lowlanders, the Gaelic population, particularly in the Isles, were the height of human barbarity, showing very clearly that they weren't familiar with the people of England. As such, it is no wonder that when the Fife adventurers arrived in 1598 with 600 people, both civilians and mercenaries, that they had been authorised to slaughter, mutilate and burn the inhabitants of Lewis if it proved necessary in their civilising mission. The mission these colonists were tasked with was to anglicise the Isle, to remove all Gaelic influence and to make a profit, on the condition that each year the Crown received £1,000 plus 3,600 fish every year as a food duty, which was a fee required for the right to use the land. So far I have been unable to find out how much £1,000 Scots was worth at the time, only that it was a substantial sum of money. After the settlement was established, the MacLeod chief Roderick dispatched his sons Murdoch and Neil to harass the settlers. Throughout the year, the brothers waged a campaign of raids against the would-be colonisers. In December 1598, when attempting to sail to the mainland for provisions, James Learmont of Balcomie, one of the 11 nobles who comprised the Fife adventurers, was captured by Murdoch MacLeod. Soon after, during the same winter, Neil MacLeod attacked the settlement with 200 men, killing 20 of the settlers and seizing their livestock amongst other property. Things appeared to be getting better for the adventurers when a power struggle amongst the MacLeods broke out, and Neil betrayed his brother, handing him over to the settlers. However, their alliance did not last very long, with the remaining brother launching more attacks on the settlers, eventually forcing them to abandon the isle. The adventurers did not give up. with another settlement being made in August 1605, only for them to be driven out by the MacLeods by October 1606. In October of 1607, a new and final group of adventurers received a grant to colonise the isle, but were also unsuccessful. After this point, the Crown seemingly abandoned the idea of lowlanders colonising the Highlands, at least by directly establishing settlements. Instead, the Crown resorted to granting the chief of the MacLeod's rival Mackenzie clan, Kenneth, the right to attack Lewis in exchange for its land. This was successful, with the MacLeods being driven out, with Neil being executed by hanging on April the 1st of 1613 in Edinburgh, where his head was then displayed on a pike. This would mark a move away from allegedly civilising the Highlands by replacing the local ruling class and establishing settlements, as was being done in Ireland at the same time. From this point onwards, there would be more of a concerted effort on the part of the Scottish government to assimilate members of the Highlanders' ruling families and then civilise the rest of the Gaelic population through these men. If you enjoyed this video and would like to learn more about similar topics, there are sources in the description, or you could subscribe, as I plan to make more videos about similar topics in the future.